Welcome to Chronicles of Old Singapore. This is Dr Loh KS, the people's historian. And in this part of the podcast, I talk about my own research on the social histories of Singapore. So it's just me for this part of the podcast. Thanks for following and watching this video, and do subscribe to the channel for future episodes. This will help us a lot, right? So finally, we are at part 6 of the Bukit Ho Swee fire. It's taken a long time for us to get here, but no study of the Bukit Ho Swee fire can be complete, right, without looking at the most controversial and the most well-known aspect of the fire, that is the rumors and conspiracy theories which arose among the people of Bukit Ho Swee and even Singaporeans in general. Right. So there were widespread rumors of arson, about the cause of the fire, the origins of the fire, the intentions even about why this fire started. It is difficult to establish what really happened as a historian, but I still find the rumors interesting as historical claims. They are claims about what happened, and it's interesting for a historian. They tell us a lot about Singapore in the past and in the present, right? They tell us how Singapore has changed from the 1960s to, what happened afterwards, the development of Singapore in the 70s onwards, right? So it tells us about the different belief systems of people who live in the kampongs, and tell us the belief systems of Singapore citizens, as they grew up, as they matured in a very different Singapore after the 1960s. During my PhD, I actually quite naively tried to find out the cause of the Bukit Ho Swee fire, right? But but seriously, the cause of a fire is a legitimate study, right? In disaster studies, in fire studies, and in history in general, right? Because when you look at why a fire started, it tells us deeper issues about the kind of factors that led to the fire. So a fire might be because of an accident, or it might be because of arson, but there are always deeper causes, which could be physical, which could be environmental, which could be social. So in Singapore's case, right, there had also been a fire uh, a bit later. In 1978, there was this big spirals explosion, which is caused by a fire on an oil tanker, right, in Jurong shipyard. And this was the worst industrial disaster in Singapore history. There was a very major commission of inquiry into why these explosions happened, right? And then there was a report published by the commission. And the report was very illuminating because it told us, that there were unsafe practices in the shipyard, and this allowed future protocols to be put in place, right, for a more safe working environment. So very important in that sense. But there was no similar report on the cause of the Bukit Ho Swee fire. I didn't find any. But what I did find was that there was a police investigation on these claims about arson. These conspiracy theories were taken quite seriously. So this was a paper trail I began to follow when I was doing my PhD. The most common conspiracy theory was that the government had started the fire to clear the kampong for public housing, right? So I have to say there were different theories. Some people say it was due to gangsters, and some people say it was due to a cooking accident in the kampong house, at that kampong house 174A, right, at Tiong Bahru, Kampong Tiong Bahru. So we'll come back to that house a bit later on. So these rumors were really circulating on the very day of the fire, on 25th of May 1961. So in fact, the PAP Assemblywoman Chan Choi Seong for Delta appealed to the fire victims at the relief center not to believe in these rumors, right? There was a audio clip of her appealing to the fire victims, but I can't find it anymore. But there is also a social welfare officer who was at the scene in the relief center on the night of the fire, I think, or the next day, who was telling the fire victims that the government would not have set the fire because it didn't make sense, right? To set the fire, and then Lee Kuan Yew and his cabinet came to the fire site to try to reassure the fire victims and take care of them by rehousing them and giving them relief subsidies and all that. So let's listen, right, to what this social welfare official was saying.
今仔日兄弟姊妹的艰苦，就是阮做政府的人的艰苦。今仔日恁的欢喜，恁的快乐，就是阮政府的欢喜的快乐，这是现实。所以阮大家下昏敢来到这来面对现实。所以这个会到底什么人办的？就迄个无良心的人办。咱政府决断无甲你办这个会，若有甲你办这个会，定着无来这所在，唔敢来面对现实。所以当迄个火灾的时阵，迄一暗，咱的总理就宣布，讲起这个火灾啊，真正严重，结果一直就起来救灾的工作。所以这个消息发表的时阵啊，第二日舆论界也是讲到大家出来来救这摆河水山甲中马路的兄弟姊妹的灾难。
Right. So you can tell if you understand some Hokkien, right, or Teochew, that he was trying to reassure and the fire victims that they will be taken care of, and that the government had actually launched this relief efforts on a national basis to try to help them, tide over this crisis, right? So this is a rational kind of perspective that he was trying to convey to the fire victims, but not completely successful, right? So if you see some of the Chinese newspapers, they are very interesting. They reported that the fire was not an accident but a deliberate act. So they were reporting, right? They were not saying that it was a deliberate act. The Nanyang Sangpao said that the fire was caused not by heaven but by scoundrels more evil than wild beasts. Right? There were supposedly two men, right, who allegedly had set fire to this hut at 174A. And they were saying to each other, "Bolang bolang kid," right? That there's no one here. Quick, let's do it. The Xingzhou Ribao said that he interviewed this young Hokkien man called Huang Qingchao, who was someone who was managing pirate taxis. He seemed like a shady person, and he said that he was not home, so I think he lived in Tiong Bahru, but he had seen someone had set the fire, right? That's what he said. So there's a lot of these kind of claims going on in the Chinese newspapers. Now, to me, these are rumors, and I take them as rumors. I don't take them as legitimate accusations, but even rumors are interesting in history, right? Rumors are often very widespread and very powerful. They tell us something about society at the time. It's very interesting for a social historian like me, right? So rumors don't happen in a vacuum. There's always a context for the rumors. So in the 1950s, what was this context before the Bukit Ho Swee fire? There was eviction, there was clearance, and the rise of public housing in competition for land, right, for housing space with the kampongs. So this is something I've covered in the previous episodes, specifically the one on the raw from the kampongs. And so this had created a distrust between the colonial government at the time and the people living in the kampong, that there was always this intention by the colonial government to clear the kampongs for public housing, and they were using fire as a means to clear the kampong. Right? And generally, there was a deeper distrust between the colonial government and the people, not just because of fires, but in general, they were not very trusting of the British government, because the government was quite aloof, and the government wasn't able to really explain the things that it was doing to the people in general. And this was also an anti-colonial time, right? There was a lot of nationalism among the people of Singapore, and this created more distrust. Even remember the clearance of Covent Garden in the 1950s before the Bukit Ho Swee fire. There was this kampong dweller who was telling the SIT official that you are European, you have no right to tell me what to do. So this is a photo I've shown before, and it shows the people in the kampong or even the passerbys trying to fight the policemen and the firemen for control of the hoses to fight the fire, right? So this shows very clearly the distrust between the people and the authorities. So it's very interesting to look at some of the claims, right? So the PAP and the social welfare department, so they were trying to say, let's be rational, right? It's not possible for the government to set the fire and then spend so much effort to try to rehouse the fire victims. Lee Kuan Yew had promised 9 months. Within 9 months, there would be houses for every fire victim. But there were other facts that, so-called facts, right, that the fire victims were pointing to, which were just as compelling to them, right? So let's look at some of these claims, right? So 25th of May 1961 was a public holiday. It was Hari Raya Haji. So the kind of reasoning was that only 4 people died, right? And the aim was just to clear the kampong. It was a public holiday. Most people were out, because it was a holiday, and the number of casualties was very low. That shows that the intention was not to kill people, but to remove the kampong. Uh, Another one, the fire engines did not fight the fire. They were just standing on the road. They didn't do anything. So a lot of these claims are quite dubious, right? If you think about it more rationally. Actually, a lot of people were at home during the Hari Raya Haji, and that is how you see that people ran home and got their uh, got themselves out, took whatever they could from their houses and left, right? Some people were out, certainly, but they rushed back. And there was still quite a lot of people in the kampong. The fire engines could not fight the fire because they couldn't get into the kampong. There's a simple explanation for that. Another claim was that the fire could not have spread here and there. It suddenly was here and suddenly it had opened a new front elsewhere. So there must have been different people setting the fire at different parts of the kampong, right? The explanation for this is quite simple. I think it was a very windy day, and the flames were able to spread because of the wind carrying the burning things around the kampong. People observed there was a plane flying over the kampong, so this is true. But I think the plane was not trying to spread the fire. The plane was just taking photographs, right? And one of the most interesting things was that many of the kampong dwellers had actually received eviction notices before the fire. And they refused to move, right? This was quite common at the time. People didn't want to move to a HDB flat because of the rent, because they would have to give up their pigs and their vegetables and all that. And then the HDB flats were completed in record time for the fire victims. So the thinking here is, this 1+1 = 3, right? Like, okay, so if you look at this photograph here, this is at the bottom of Bukit Ho Swee, I think near Havelock Road, where the fire victims have fled to, right? So this is a scene of disaster, a very sad scene. But in the background, right, you can see 2 blocks of HDB flats. One that is here that is half completed, and you can see that there are actually people standing in the parapet is not built yet, and there are people standing on the upper floors looking at the fire. It was a really good vantage point, right, to look at the fire. And then there's a more completed one. I'm not sure if it's fully completed over here. And then the fire site itself would be acquired by the government, and more emergency housing will be built on it. So the thinking of the people was that you set the fire to clear the kampong, and then you build public housing on it. So I would want to say, right, just to go back to the previous slide, that these claims were due to anger and distrust, right? And they do not stand up to scrutiny. and there's no evidence, right? More importantly, for any of these claims. There's no evidence, right, that the firemen were told not to fight the fire. There's no evidence that this plane was actually setting fire to it. I mean, no evidence in the sense that there are no documentation, right? There's no documentary proof that these intentions lay behind these uh, actions or these activities. The newspapers did carry some reports on the police investigation. So the police took these rumors quite seriously, and their investigations were reported in the newspapers to some extent. So 3 days after the fire on the 28th of May, the CID summoned two residents who live near 174A for questioning. I think probably because they knew something or they said they saw something. In early June, a few days later, the newspapers reported that there were allegedly 10 witnesses who had been questioned by the police. And the newspaper article said that there was supposedly a sufficient proof, but no concrete evidence. I mean, this is a very strange statement. How can there be sufficient proof, but no concrete evidence? So I think they didn't get the order right, right? So I think what happened was that these 10 witnesses had claimed that they saw something and that it was actually someone committing arson, but no one could actually give evidence for it. On the 9th of June, and one person, right, was actually arrested and interrogated by the police. The name was not given, but he was released soon because of the lack of evidence. And that's the end of these police investigations in the newspapers. There was no further reports, and the matter of the origins of the Bukit Ho Swee fire was left unresolved. Now, we fast forward 40 years later on. In 2002, MediaCorp uh, screened a Chinese drama series called Bukit Ho Swee, He Sui San. So this is just 1 year, right? 41 years after the fire. I think they must have missed the 40th year, 2001. Anyway, the drama series, which I didn't get to watch because I haven't started doing my PhD yet. I I think I just left teaching this year to start my master's. Uh, the drama series had nothing to say about arson, right? Of course. Uh, but there are some interesting storylines or details in the show, uh, which kind of tell us the kind of official view of the fire, right? So the locals were portrayed to be very careless about fires. They were not very mindful. That the gangsters were a menace to the kampong, and they had threatened to burn it down. And actually, of course, the drama series had to actually end, right? Kind of end with the fire breaking out. And it's very interesting here that the fire was actually started by one of the characters who was mentally unstable. So I don't really like this because it shows mentally unstable people are being dangerous. Um, so this would not have been a good idea today. It is not politically correct. But the other kind of portrayals are quite interesting here, that the locals were careless. I've talked about it in the previous episode that this was not necessarily so. They were quite mindful. It's just that they were not able to, be 100% fireproof in that sense, right? Because the circumstances, the environment made it very hard for them to be completely safe. Gangsters were not a menace. They were in by default, right? Like the protectors of the kampong. It would not make sense for the gangsters to burn down the kampong. Although I would not discount it, right? Because if there was a secret society conflict, this could happen, right? A few years later, Lim Kim San, the first chairman of the HDB, who had a lot to do with the Bukit Ho Swee rebuilding project, he passed away, and there was a lot of commiserations of him from the government and the media, obviously. But interestingly, there was some accusations thrown at him and at the government because of his role, right, at Bukit Ho Swee. So I took note of some of these online postings, So one of them said, every old folks will be able to tell you BHS was burned down by the arrogant peppies. So 45 years after the fire, these rumors were still very much alive in the minds of people. And I think even to this day, right, in 2025. So when I did my PhD, this was in 2006, 2005, 2006. I was trying to find people to talk about these rumors as well. So it was a very interesting research. I found that the rumors were alive, but people were talking about them in a very, very different way. And often they were not willing to talk about it at all. So my first interview was the most educational one, right? So I went to the community center at Bukit Ho Swee. I think it was Kim Seng Community Center, and there was this group of women having a dance class, I think, and I just knocked on the door politely and say, "Can I speak to you?" And these were elderly women, right? So some of them knew about the fire, and this particular interviewee began to say, right, she had seen a burning torch thrown onto an atap roof in Bukit Ho Swee on the very day of the fire. But then she caught herself and she stopped talking, right? And she told me in Mandarin, "We can't say this, we'll be arrested. Better not say. You also must not say." So right away, right, I was very struck by this. Why were people so afraid to talk about the fire, the rumors of the fire? So one of the things I had to learn, and learn it on the very day, was to ask the question on the rumors the last in the interview, right? So I asked them about other aspects of the kampong, about where they live and kampong life and what happened after the fire. And then the last question I'll ask them is, what do you think about the cause of the Bukit Ho Swee fire, or how the fire started? So one interviewee told me this suspicion was because in the past things like that had happened, and like throwing burning rags onto atap roofs, the things we saw, right? So the things we saw, right? He said we, 我们看到的. So this is a kind of a generalization. Most interviewees said something like this, but they use a distancing strategy, right? Yes, we saw such things, but it was other people who spread these rumors, who believe in the rumors, but not I, right? I was too rational to believe them. In fact, most of the interviewees said that the rumors were wild talk, right? In Hokkien, it's 乱讲, right? 乱讲, eh? Thea Chuan, for example, he was a very, very good interviewee. I really love interviewing with him. He said that even if there were witnesses who saw what happened, right, it's useless without evidence. Singapore is all about law. So I wasn't asking specifically about the law here, right? But he had gone on his own initiative to kind of explain what he thought about these rumors. So it's a very interesting insight into his thinking. And I do agree with him. Of course, evidence is important. You can't just make claims. Um, Another interviewee said it was 50-50 chance that the government had set the fire because the fire occurred on a public holiday, so only 4 people were killed. So this is the theory, the conspiracy theory that I mentioned earlier. Only one interviewee told me that he believed the rumors. I asked him the question, how the fire started. And he looked down and then up at me and he said, "Yeah, the government has set the fire in order to redevelop Singapore." So there's a positive side to it, right? So yes, he believed that the government did it, but this is for a good reason, to redevelop Singapore. What can a historian do, right? So I had tried to find the sources. I had tried to do research into the cause of the fire. I didn't get anywhere. I couldn't see any historical sources. So for a historian, I have to say historical evidence is necessary, right? We need to look at proof, documentary proof. We cannot just listen to people's claims. And that's the same way that the police had worked, right, in 1961. So I didn't find any evidence. Now, what do I think? What is my professional opinion on this? So I do not think that the government did it, because the real cause of the fire, as I looked at the Bukit Ho Swee fire and the previous fire before it, and the larger history of the fires, right? The historical context and the background. The real cause of the fire was the vulnerability of Bukit Ho Swee and the urban kampongs in general, right? The geography of risk, that the kampongs were situated in a place which was very risky to live in, right? There was a lot of flammable material, the wood and the atap, the lack of fire breaks, literally the fire engines couldn't get into the kampong. The water pressure was low, so if a fire broke out and it was growing, you had no way to fight it, even if the fire engines were there. So this is all covered in part three of my podcast. So if you haven't seen it, please go ahead and look at it. So all these factors, right? And the larger background behind this was that the government was prioritizing the building of public housing, HDB housing. This is not to say the government was not concerned about the kampongs and the people living in the kampongs. I think the government was very concerned about the people living in the kampongs, but the amount of effort to make the kampong safe from fire, right? To deal with all these issues, right? The kind of materials that they were built with, the lack of fire breaks. If you had to create fire breaks in the kampong, you have to demolish some houses. And that is not an easy thing to do because it would mean displacing some of the residents. Low water pressure, that could be done, I think. But also, you have to think that there were over 50 urban kampongs at the time, right? So, where are you going to start? And I think this is the key here, right? So, if the fire had not broken out in Bukit Ho Swee in 1961, it would have broken up in another kampong, whether in the Bukit Ho Swee, Tiong Bahru area or it's on the other side of the city in the Kalang and Geylang areas. So, and it was sort of inevitable given the historical situation at the time. Now, what was the real cost of the fire, right? So, this is a question that is as interesting to me as a historian, right? As a Singaporean, actually. So, Tea Chuan had talked about, Singapore is all about law. So, okay, but if Singapore is under the rule of law, why are Singaporeans so afraid to talk about the rumors at all? Like, if you say that in the past you had believed in the rumors, but you don't believe in it now, I mean, I think that's a reasonable stance to take because Singaporeans have seen what the government had done for them, right, in the years after the fire. So the fire happened in 1961. The PAP had just been elected into office 2 years earlier. So this is not a very long time to show the people that the government was actually concerned and effective as a government. In fact, the HDB had, and as I said in the previous episode, had built very few HDB flats for the people up to the time of the fire. So you can understand that some people would believe in the rumors. So why are Singaporeans so uh, unwilling to talk about the rumors if indeed Singapore is governed by law and people are protected by law, right? So it shows me something about the psyche of Singaporeans today, right? Or in the years since the fire. So people are unwilling to go on the record, right? So I know that a lot of elderly Singaporeans will talk about the cause of the fire and know about these rumors and talk about these rumors and conspiracy theories in coffee shops among friends, and they will talk about it. They will post about it online because they will be anonymous. Uh, I'm not sure that it's so safe these days, with the ability to track your IPs and all that. What is clear, what is certain is that Singaporeans have become averse to controversy and politically sensitive histories, right? And I think this is quite a pity, right? So I'm going to make some suggestions. If you want to find out more about these rumors and conspiracy theories, try to find someone who knew about these rumors, right? There are still many older people who know about these rumors and try to engage them and get them to talk about these rumors and see what you find, right? The other thing is, I think the rumors are really part of our history, and to deny them, right, at a public level, right, it is quite a pity, right? Because if we talk about rumors, right, we are not trying to say that the rumors are true, but to consider the claims in the rumors and take them seriously, and look at the background, look at the uh, situation at the time, look at different factors, look at both sides. Actually, this is a very healthy intellectual process. And this is also a very healthy social process for Singaporeans, right? Why? Because one, they encourage debate and nurture analytical skills, right? If someone makes a claim and tells you, I believe in this, I believe in that, right? Let's say, for example, during COVID, right? Some people were saying that the vaccine was unsafe. If some people are talking about this, you have got to be able to think about these things analytically and critically, right? People are making claims, right? And you are shown material which show one side of the picture. What do you do? How do you analyze, right? So these are very important analytical skills going forward, actually, because we live in a complex world, and the world is full of conflicting claims. So we have got to be able to develop our own ability to independently judge these issues, right? And the other thing is that they promote active citizenship, right? So analyzing these rumors and thinking about these rumors is not just for personal development, right? Your own thinking skills, but they also promote a sense of commitment and belonging to Singapore, right? That this is part of our history and something like this happened, right? And should we think about this and try to understand what was happening at the time, right? This is part of our history after all. So, a number of years ago, I co edited a book called A Controversial History Education in Asian Contexts with a professor from the National Institute of Education, NIE. So, he's an expert on history and social studies education, Mark Belden. He has since retired and gone back to the States. I think he's still working there. So the premise of this book and this project was that we should not shun away from controversial histories. We should actually embrace them in the classroom so that we can develop thinking skills and active citizenship. In conclusion, right? So we finally come to the end of the Bukit Ho Swee fire episodes. The background to the fire gave rise to widespread rumors of arson, right? And these were conspiracy theories which arose because of the distrust between the people and the government at the time. And finally, controversial histories do help to develop our critical thinking and active citizenship. So I've come to the end of the podcast on the fire, the greatest fire in Singapore history. I hope you enjoyed it, and you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment box below or email me. My email is below as well. So very happy to have you join me on this journey, studying the Bukit Ho Swee fire, which has also been like a way for me to go back to Bukit Ho Swee of my childhood. So it's a very interesting history personally for me, and also for the Chronicles of Old Singapore. Thank you, and see you soon again. Bye.